In the Feldenkrais world, there's not a lot of attention given to how the voice integrates into the whole self as a part of the functional whole. And I find that it often gets left out of the picture in a way. And there are some instances, like what Feldenkrais does in Amherst at a certain point, and a couple times in a workshop here and there, where Feldenkrais actually brings it into the canon himself. But by and large, in the community, it's not part of the training and not part of how people are generally integrated into the method. So for practitioners, what would you say would be interesting in exploring this kind of work as Feldenkrais relates to voice and voice relates to Feldenkrais, that it would bring, what do you think it would bring to the practitioner's understanding of the method itself?
Well, from a purely practical point of view, I think it's very important. And I, as you know, presented quite a few workshops on my own and with you to people who are interested in working with voice and teaching voice and bringing the Feldenkrais method into the world of singing teachers or speech pathologists, or people who are basically gravitating around the domain of voice, is going to give Feldenkrais practitioner this additional degree of confidence that they can handle the technical part of how the voice works. Feldenkrais did have some very good ideas about how to introduce voice learning, voice training, and did present a few lessons in the AMHERST training that went in that direction, but not really enough to give, in my experience, graduates of the current training programs, as far as I know, the confidence and the competence, maybe in some case, to really be able to work with a singer or an actor or someone who has vocal difficulties.
Right.
So my intention, and I think it is with your input, it is quite easily feasible. My intention is to add to the ideas and the direction that Feldenkrais gave us through his lessons in Amherst, more that practitioners or graduates can take home to be able to not only understand their own voices better, but also understand how they could help people who come to them with concerns or difficulties with their voice, and really be effective at helping people overcome those difficulties.
Right. And one thing I'm thinking now, often it's a reference where after a person does a lesson, even though it might be about their feet or some kind of movement that doesn't seem to have anything to do with voice, afterward, a very different quality of voice might emerge, which is often an interesting effect, but not necessarily well understood. So what we're saying also is that the opposite is also true, that one can work with one's voice in a Feldenkrais manner that really does have an impact on the whole system, just like the typical ATMs and FIs have an impact on the system such that the voice is affected.
And then, I agree, and then the voice could become part of the evaluation or the it could be part of the scanning, as we like to call it, or it could be part of the evaluation or the self-assessment that we tend to do at the end of the lesson, by becoming more aware of the effect of a Feldenkrais session and understanding that through an enhanced awareness of what happens here with my breathing and what's the consequence for my voice, and how can I use that to continue have my voice evolve and become more and more potent, more and more differentiated, more and more able to express the different moods that I'm in, the different intentions that I have, so that really, even if I'm just teaching an ATM class, I would have at my disposal a much bigger instrument
Mm.
than just a limited range and a limited ability to use my voice
Right.
yourself. Yeah.
Right.
So I have a question for you.
Oh.
Oh,
Wow.
so you're a very well, let's call it an expert. Let's use that word. You're an expert singing teacher.
Mhm.
And when you started using the Feldenkrais method, and particularly when you looked at those lessons from the Amherst training that
Mhm.
do address voice and voice production, what is it that sparked you? What is it that inspired you to say, hey, let's go further there?
Well, first, I think the interesting part about how Feldenkrais comes at the voice is that he comes from this very global place and then comes inward. So there's a lot of preparation in terms of the torso, in terms of the limbs, and the head and the neck, and organizing all of the head and the neck in such a way that if you think about how we have this head and this sort of everything under it, and then we have everything under it and then this head, I find that the approach was very clearly organizing everything. And of course, right in the middle of that juncture is this beautiful tube with all these little moving parts that of course are affected by how we carry the head, how we carry the torso and use the limbs. So everything was set up in this really cool way so that by the time he got to something very specifically vocal, there was already a very available organization. And then he didn't do it in a very direct way. He really did it in a way that was like a question and really made it about survival. And what if you needed to use your voice to survive? How well would you survive? And I think that's a question that I think singers panic about a little bit because there is a kind of survival. When singing is your job, it's a different kind of survival. It's like, how can I sing 3 operas a week and not lose my voice? I mean, there's something survival oriented about that. How can I sing 8 shows a week and not lose my voice? But then there's sort of the regular survival. How can I use my voice to call someone in danger? How can I use my voice to call for help when I'm in danger? And I think putting those things together really gives you a window into voice that's much more primal and much more about self-use in anything you do. And then from there, it can branch out into all sorts of little special things. But that's like the foundation. And I find that to be a really beautiful place to kind of really go underneath if you're a singer, because we're used to all these fine little skills, but maybe we haven't really organized in a survival oriented way. So we run into troubles. And then if you are a quote unquote non-singer or general person, that having that base is a place where you can get to those fine-tuned abilities, but from a foundation that is sound, that is clear, that is free, that's ready, and
Yeah.
and has that survival power,
Mm-hmm.
which is
So
cool.
it's a different definition of what a good voice would be.
Right,
It's not just having a beautiful voice and a pretty voice. It's having a voice that
right,
can really serve a person to be functional
right,
and healthy.
right.
Yeah.
From every kind of situation, from speaking with a young child to protecting yourself against a predator to
Mm-hmm.
calling for help in an avalanche.
Mm-hmm.
All of those require very different ways of using the voice, but each are equally important. And then there's the fun. I mean, I can only imagine that humans for a while there were quite bored around the fire at night and found a lot of time to play with what we can do in here. So beyond the survival part, it was also a lot of play and variation and really elaboration of this instrument that we could use to have fun together, to amuse ourselves, and eventually communicate what we're feeling and so
Communicate and connect.
and connect. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all that comes together in a
Mm.
beautiful way when you
All right.
think functionally.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's I think, the line of thinking that we are going to go deeper in
Right.
with a particular workshop and use some of Feldenkrais's ATM, but also add quite a lot of our own discoveries and our own experience working with voice to go further in that direction.
Totally. I like to think that this apparatus in here is like another whole little body that can do all these complex movements, just like we explore in the Feldenkrais way with the skeleton and the head and the neck and the arms and the legs and the pelvis, that body. But there's another little body in here in the context of the whole that has so many variation and differentiation possibilities that I could spend the rest of my life, which I plan to do, figuring out all of those possibilities at the same time that I keep studying the whole self and how it all comes together. Then, to me, it's
of course. It's limitless.
Right.
Speaking of limit, should we move on?
Yes, we should. That's good. All right, so thank you.
Yes.
And
looking forward to more conversations, and certainly this coming workshop is going to be interesting.
Cool. All right.
All right.
Thank you.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.